to the first in a while, or I don't know, is it the first ever? It depends how you think about it. Certainly the first branded this way forum, the State of Grace Forum. I guess we've had forums in the past on specific subjects. This is a more general forum on life at Grace, and this is the fruit or the suggestion of Lisa Friedman. Lisa Friedman is a friend of Kevin and John, formerly on staff at Trinity Wall Street in New York, and moved back to Portland. And Lisa's been doing some consulting work for us, gave us the gift of doing some consulting work for us, and had some really great suggestions about so life in general at the parish, and also how we might get more skillful at communication at the parish. And one of her suggestions was you should periodically do a forum where you sort of talk about how governance is going and how stuff is going at Grace, and where you take questions. And that is what this forum is. We'll be doing these on a regular basis going ahead. Kevin is thinking probably, what were you saying, the end of the...
Once a month. So the last Sunday of every month, we'll have one of these. It's just an opportunity to ask questions. And so I think with Father Martin going on sabbatical, what a perfect time for us all to get together and talk. So there you go.
And I think my sense is one of the things that folks are most keen to learn about is the development project, campus development project. A lot of things are going on that front. Most of them to do with paperwork at the moment. Sally Fraser has been, so Grace doesn't have physical pillars, but that doesn't mean there aren't pillars of the church. And actually there's a row of pillars of the church sitting up here, but none more these last number of months than Sally Fraser, who's been working so hard on 3 or 4 documents. So there's what's called the Articles of Incorporation for the consortium of organizations that are going to own and operate the new building, which are Grace Memorial itself, Grace Institute. Sharon is here as both as a parishioner and as Grace Institute's executive director, and our friends at Fame. So the Articles of Incorporation that get that started and then permit us to turn that consortium into an official not-for-profit. The bylaws that will govern that organization. So those are 2 big projects. Sally's also been working on the application for not-for-profit status, which it turns out is it's less work to get a doctorate than to, well, it's incredible. And then with the assistance of our lawyer, Sarah Heskett at Holland and Knight, who's just a crackerjack. Oh my goodness, this is what Sarah does, and what Sarah's done for almost 30 years, and is doing some pro bono work for us. Incredible gift towards this project. We've been working on what's called the option to lease agreement. I've learned so much terminology this last while with Northwest Housing Alternatives. So that is the lease that will govern, it's not the lease, it's the option to lease that will govern where the affordable housing is going to sit. And so what the option to lease says is that we're going steady with Northwest Housing Alternatives. They've probably spent about $100,000 on this project thus far, with their fingers crossed that a deal was going to happen. And what the option to lease says is that Grace can't just walk away for any or no reason. They want to spend some more money on site surveys, work with the city, doing something called a street vacation, which is vastly less fun than it sounds like. It actually is a thing that says we have access to a slot of land that we wouldn't otherwise have access to on the block for the development. And they don't want to spend that money if Grace is reserving the right to say, we just, we're not feeling it anymore, we're leaving. So the option to lease will extend through, I believe, the end of 2025. They'll have till the end of 2025 to get a project funded and get started, they're feeling pretty confident they can do that. Simultaneously, those other documents we talked about, articles of incorporation, the bylaws, are in furtherance of getting the community and ministry and arts building built, the new parish hall, if you like, although we're not really calling it that in the community, the new community building. Yeah, that's right. And that is the thing for which the capital campaign, which you had a little bit of a teaser about, is in furtherance of paying for. A lot of our work right now is figuring out how to, is this a good way of putting it, how to make disaster as unlikely as possible, and how to address disaster should it happen. So no one on their wedding day says, we'll be getting divorced in 7 years. That's just a speech that you never hear. And in a similar vein, nobody goes into a project like this saying the relationship is going to completely collapse in 10 years and there's going to be a big fight. It's important to plan for that scenario, and it's important to do all you can to make it unlikely. Sharon and Jenny Stadler, who is the executive director of FAME, and I groove together really well. We know that an organization can get a new executive director and the wheels can fall off when that happens. So I think part of our goal, would you say, is to sort of set things up so that when a new executive director comes in to one of these organizations, they know what they're signing up for, and it's less likely that we're going to have friction. But it also talks about what a divorce would look like. What happens if FAME needs to exit, or the church needs to exit, or we don't aspire to ever exit this property, but who knows? Or there's never going to be a scenario in which Grace Institute exits, but more likely would be a scenario in which FAME has outgrown the building. They've grown tremendously in the last 15 years. They might continue to grow tremendously. How do they get some equity out of the building? How do they leave in an amicable way? And how are we assured of having a new tenant, a new partner, who is appropriate to the building? We don't really want an Amazon warehouse to move in. We want a suitable new partner should that happen. So would you say there's other things, Sally, that we're kind of working on in those docs, or is that sort of a broad survey?
Certainly broadly, a project like this, as you can imagine, involves numerous documents, and there'll be facilities use agreements, there'll be ground lease agreements, because Grace is going to continue to own the land under the building. So there's, I hate to tell you, there's about 8 documents that are left to be continued. So there's some work, but they're boring, they're full of details and things. So I'm just kind of, I know, I've given up trash novels and I'm reading procedures and policies, and I'm just in heaven. We're so appreciative too.
Now, I've been going to all of the meetings that the 3, Sharon and Jenny and Martin, have gone to, so that I can, Grace Memorial can be represented appropriately in all of those meetings. So I will be stepping in for Father Martin while he's on sabbatical.
I guess oh my goodness, that thought just fell out of my head. It was really a good one too.
It'll come back.
It'll come back. Thank you, Kate. I appreciate it. Oh gee, I don't know. There was something else about the development. Oh yes, I knew if I waited long enough, it would show up again. So one of the things I said, I've learned a lot of new terminology this last while. I've also learned a lot about how these processes work, and so a while ago when was it, would you say, was it 4 years ago, we did a bunch of community discernment about, like, is this a project we want to do? And we did a lot of peripheral discernment. That was hard sometimes. And we got to a point where we said, yes, we want to do this work. I've since spoken to folks who say that's actually probably the hardest part of a project like this, is getting a community to yes on something like that, and that feels consistent with my own experience. That was sometimes really challenging and really special. And what I've heard from other communities who've sort of done similar work, similar projects, is that when they kind of got to the far side of that intense discernment, that the community was really freed up to be excited about the project. And it feels like that's actually what has happened at Grace, that the community is excited about this project. And we're now, as you heard in Grace Notes a couple months ago, ramping up the capital campaign. Another thing I've learned from our capital campaign consultant is this is a normal moment for capital campaigns to get stuck. We've done all of this preparatory work in terms of putting together this document, and our website is amazing. And now we're at this point where we got to go start making asks of folks, and that I think sort of feels like a diving board moment. If you remember being 8 and realizing the water was further away than you thought, once you jump, like, it's okay. And you're like, oh, I have to get up there and do it a second time. But I think it's difficult to get started. That's a thing Diane has told us. So we've been thinking about, in the church specifically, how we actually get the campaign started. And what we have a wonderful small capital campaign team. If you wish you were on that team, you could be. Let me know if that's of interest to you. And what we've decided to do, just to get off the diving board, is to rig the game so that we have, at the last vestry meeting, we said, hey vestry, what if you all volunteer to be the first people who the capital campaign team is going to call? You're going to know in advance they're phoning, and please be prepared to say yes when. So the capital campaign team has the list of vestry members. It includes me, it includes Liz, and we expect those calls to start going out. I can't wait to be asked, Phoebe and I can't wait to be asked to support the capital campaign, because we are going to say yes. We've been thinking hard about whether we, for a while there it looked like we were opposed to it, but we've decided we're going to support it. And so we're hoping that that'll generate some momentum for the team, but it's also going to do something important, which is it's going to permit us to say to donors, everybody on the board has made a pledge to the capital campaign, which is a super important thing to be able to say. I think, Kevin, what else do we need to say about the development project?
We were talking with Trinity Wall Street on Thursday, I think. And it was really fascinating because this project is 2 projects. It's the Northwest Housing Development Project, and then it's the Grace Consortium. Obviously, the Northwest Housing Project is farther along, and it was helpful talking to them, because they said, it sounds to me like you guys, for the Grace Commons Consortium building, are really at the feasibility part. And it was helpful to have those kinds of descriptors. And so because we know the other one is farther along. And it was obvious that way. We had to get the option to lease for NHA done. It was timely because there's grants that are coming up, and if we miss that, we have to go back to the end of the line. So that's where we are. We're at the feasibility stage with Grace Commons Consortium, and we're figuring out all the different to-dos, like how are we going to be working. There's going to be a ground lease that Grace Commons Consortium is going to be paying to Grace Memorial, but how's that all going to work? And so it's interesting. Do you have anything to say?
We're hoping for a really good deal on that grant. Really good deal. And if you haven't been asked by a vestry member or the committee, Grace Institute will ask too. So we'll get you twice.
I can't sit up here while saying anything. But anyways, on a serious note, funders look for enthusiasm, and so they look at the participation rate as much as it'll be good for the vestry, to have 100% participation rate. If in the congregation, if we have as high as possible, say maybe 80% or 90%, that looks very good and encouraging to funders. So, we encourage one another to participate, no matter how small it is, but it will just increase our participation rate and show that we're enthusiastic about the project.
I should just add, in addition to the enthusiasm, there is a grant that's available. Once we reach $1 million, then there is a grant that'll come in for another $1 million. So that's sort of an incentive to get going.
And one of the things that Sally is working so hard on is this Form 1023, and that is the application for nonprofit status with the feds. And once that is submitted, and we are very hopeful, confident that we will get nonprofit status, that also opens up a wonderful door where we would then be a full-on nonprofit and not basically with a fiscal sponsorship through Grace Institute. So that opens a lot of other opportunities with granting foundations. So that's another reason why we're working hard on that.
And when Sally was talking about hitting that $1 million mark, that $1 million mark is all three groups. It's not just Grace Memorial. It's Grace Memorial, Grace Institute, and FAME. Once we hit that, then it's going to trigger all of these other grants and fundraising possibilities. We've been doing about 20 minutes of talking up here. I think it would be great to answer any of your questions, because I'm sure you've got some, and we'll just be happy to answer any of them. So don't hesitate to raise your hand. Yes?
I don't know. Just a quick question.
The only
I have
reason-
seen all of you on the small screen. Can you tell us who you are in person so we recognize you as people?
Absolutely. I'll start since I have the microphone. I'm Kevin Walsh. I'm one of your co-senior wardens.
Yeah, I'm Martin, and I've been coming to Grace for 6.5 years.
I'm Sharon Loomis Mallon. I'm the executive director. I'm your executive director because I report to you.
I'm Sally Fraser. I've been coming to Grace since 1990.
I'm Charles McGee, and I came to Grace right after Sally came.
Oh, I don't need it.
Yes, it's for
The
the.
reason we need it is for the recording.
I have a church voice. My name is Judith, and Joe, my partner, and I have been invited to host a fundraiser to help kick things off. So we're hoping we have enough room and parking. We're going to talk to our neighbors and spread the word even more. But we had a rug cleaner come to the house, and I told him why we were getting the rugs cleaned, and he donated a tithe of his money to this project. So. Oh, I don't remember what the date is.
I think it's Sunday, May 22nd.
Sunday, May 22nd, after church, we're having a gathering at our house. We are on a very steep hill, so we have to figure out, I do think I'm going to talk to all my neighbors on our cul-de-sac and say, could you park some folks here so they don't have to walk too far up or down the hill? But if you get up the hill and get to our house and can walk to the second floor, we have a glorious view of the Willamette Valley below us.
Thank you for hosting.
In our bedroom.
Any other questions? Robin.
Hi, yes, the question that I get asked most frequently, and since I live just down the street here, people do ask, is when do we anticipate that they'll be breaking ground for these apartments? I know that Northwest Housing Alternatives is going to be farther along than our building is. Do we have any idea of a time frame? You know, a year, 2 years, 3 years?
One of the qualifiers that we have asked of Northwest Housing Alternatives is to work around Grace Art Camp and summer schedule. So we have fall, and it would probably be potentially 2024. The low-income tax credit granting applications are the complicated process for Northwest Housing Alternatives and the timing. So probably September of 2024. That's probably the most accurate date we could give you now.
And some of these, pardon me, some of these grants also have a, once the grant's approved, there's sometimes a time limit within which there's an 18-month time limit. Once the grant's approved, you have to break ground. And so until those grants are applied for and given, that will also set a clock running, which, in other words, nobody knows yet. Robin?
Right. There, and you'll hear, there's lots and lots and lots of hoops and qualifiers. Andrew?
Thanks. Yeah, and Andrew Eshelman. And yeah, I just wondered if we could hear a little bit more about what it means when we say we're a little bit behind the housing folks. Like, are we just talking about sort of process-wise, or are we actually at this point assuming that construction will happen on different schedules for these two halves of the project, or are we hoping still sort of to time things so that both things get built roughly at the same time?
Yes, we're hoping that they can both be built at the same time. And Sally, feel free to jump in here, but there were deadlines that we needed to meet for Northwest Housing, so we concentrated on getting that done, and we concentrated on getting the 501c3 materials done, and yeah, we're almost done with that, and we're actually like this far away from getting the option to lease done. It needs to get approved by the vestry and by the diocese. So there are hoops that we still have to jump through for Northwest Housing, so we've been focusing all our energy there. We know what we need to do in our feasibility. We know what our tasks are, and once the Northwest Housing is done, we'll be focusing on that. Sally, do you have any?
I'm just going to pipe in. There's economies of scale that are really important that we are together, partly because we have the same architect, we have the same builder, those kinds of things, project management wise, very, very important. We don't know if we're actually that far behind. You know, we have a tremendous fundraising lift, we know that, but the actual building, you know, the community and arts building, it will always be the best way to go, to be in conjunction with building of the housing. So we're hoping that it's still really quite together. So
It was news to me too, that they're ahead of us, but it actually makes sense in that I think that's a slightly more streamlined isn't exactly the word, but the funding is much cleaner than having to get it from various foundations and individuals. I think there's lots of housing money available, so once that is in process and now with our option to lease started, I think we can get that going. So it's kind of a question of going through the hoops, whereas with this thing, we still have more structural pieces to put into place, but more importantly, a ton of money to raise, which will take longer than going through application processes for public funding, which is where most of the Northwest Housing Alternatives money will come from. So I'm guessing that that's a big part of the difference in timeline.
did that answer your question?
Liz?
Are there big pictures that we could hang up and get someone to, people do well with pictures of plans, and has that already been done before my time? And maybe for some of us who are newer, we'd love to see pictures. In addition, how much money are we talking about?
So the capital campaign's goal is to raise $13.5 million between the three organizations, and pictures are an excellent idea. That would not be the least bit hard to print those out and put those up.
The website, we could start to run a loop of
The GCC website on Sunday mornings. Lots of fabulous pictures there.
do you want anything to say? But we have the architects have the boards.
I just wanted to say, and maybe people have already expressed this, but how excited I am to be part of a parish that is taking this next step in ministry. I think it will revitalize our own mission, makes it that we are walking the talk, and not every parish is as privileged as we are to be able to do this. I'm really, really excited. Having said that, I'm not sure, I might have missed it because I miss a lot of things, but are we praying regularly for this project during church? And if not, could we please do that?
Good idea.
Well, thank you for that, Myra. So it's yeah, I agree with you. This is one of the things that's made the figuring out the consortium challenging is there's no boilerplate document you can go to because we're making up a new thing. This is an innovative. We're doing a fresh thing with God's help here. So that means you can't for the ground lease. There's boilerplate contracts you can reach for how the consortium works. This is brand new, and I think it's so neat that Grace is the sort of place that is willing to take a holy risk like this, willing to create a new partnership like this. In a similar vein, we have someone on staff called a digital missioner. That's not a gig that existed in the Episcopal Church before we made it up. This is really a parish that has some vision and says, hey, we developed these competencies in pandemic, let's build on them. It's time I was actually just thinking this in worship this morning. Yes, we are praying for this project, but we're praying for it sort of in a different moment. So the line in the prayers to the people, we pray for this parish as we discern where God is calling us and who God is calling us to be is in reference to this project. But we're probably we've probably moved out of the season now of saying, should we do a project? What should the project look like? So actually, yeah, Liz, it's time to reboot the prayer, and we'll think about what it looks like to pray for this new season of the project.
And if you have suggestions, you can give them to me. Email me.
If you have suggestions, go ahead and email them to Liz.
I just wanted to say, probably to clarify that, I think it's important for us to move forward spiritually as much as it is to move forward with the project. So to look for opportunities for that, I think, are really important.
Thank you, Myra. Any other?
I just want to share a little bit of personal story here. I lived here many years ago when I started working as a priest, but I'm the daughter of a deaf and hard of hearing parents. My mother had 2 engagements broken off because she was damaged, because she was profoundly deaf, which means she could hear but not much. My father had, fortunately, by God's grace, had a bishop who ordained him even though he lost most of his hearing while he was in seminary. But I grew up, I'm a coda. You know what that is now, you've seen the movie or you've heard what it is, a child of deaf adults. So from the time I was a teeny person, I stood up and protected and interpreted for my parents and ended up working with the deaf and hard of hearing, as did my father. So I have a great passion for inclusivity. And when I was at Joe's parish, my last parish before I retired, we had 5 people on the spectrum whose families had never spoken to each other before because it was shameful. And we sat down and had lunch for several hours and talked about the stories of their lives and their children. And we had 3¼ beautiful acres in a very nice part of suburban Philadelphia. And I talked with a priest who had built low-income housing, and we had the plans, we had the architect, but we had a small failing congregation that simply couldn't do it. So we can't tell you how happy we are personally that this is happening. This is an incredible thing.
Thank you. Any other questions? I just have to say I'm very excited to be a part of this project, and I've always thought it was good, but the more I am, the deeper I get into it, the more exciting it is. And well, now we have someone who's going on sabbatical. Do you have any questions for him?
So I think I shared via the Grace Notes some of my goals for sabbatical. One of the projects is going to be, so some of you have met Rachel Bliss, and actually we're praying for Rachel because her children, Lily and Anne, will be baptized at the Easter Vigil. I encourage you to come to the Vigil to support Lily and Anne as they enter into kind of a new part of their walk with Christ as they're initiated as Christians. And Rachel's dad is my old boss at St. John's Cathedral. And Bill did the 1950s retirement plan, which is to say he retired and died immediately, which someday I will speak to him again, and I'm going to tell him how deeply I disapprove of that decision. Really premature death, really shocking death, and enormous loss for so many people, including me. And so one of the things I'm planning on doing is working on assembling Bill's sermons into a book. He was an extraordinary preacher. I'm really actually looking forward to discovering how the book is going to be organized. That's very much, I have really no idea at the moment. I suppose you could simply organize it chronologically. You could organize it by the seasons of the year. There may be other themes that surface as I'm working on this. I was visiting with Bishop a few weeks ago and told her that this was one of my goals for sabbatical, and she said, "Gosh, it sounds like your sabbatical is really going to involve some real work around grief." And I thought, and I hadn't actually explicitly articulated that before, but I bet that's right. Often, I don't know if you have this experience as well, but often when I have a break, even without something like this to work on, often when I have a break, I have enough time to be sad that I find that one of the ways, I think we all have a certain amount of self-medication we do, and one of probably the ways that I self-medicate is just through busyness. And so often having that break there's a time when grief has the opportunity to show up. So I bet Bishop is right. I think that's an insight to say that's one of the things I'll be encountering. Also looking forward to being on email less for a little bit and having a rest element in the time. We'll be doing a tiny bit of traveling, not too much, because we've got a couple kids in school, and that feels like more than we need to take on at the moment. So not a super heavily scheduled time, and a lot of folks have advised me not to make this a super heavily scheduled time, but that one project, and then the hope is to come back rested and re-energized and fired up for this work. We have a sabbatical team that is working on Life at Grace in my absence. A number of the folks sitting in front of you are on that team. Corbett Clark is on that team. Thank you, Corbett. Matthew David is on that team. Grace is going to be in excellent hands. And Liz is on that team. Thank you. While I'm away. And as I shared in Grace Notes, I think last week, I don't remember, I hope this will actually be a time of growth for the parish, where there'll be some opportunity for discovery and perhaps some new ministry. Something that has ministry that's really gotten revitalized recently is the Buildings and Grounds Committee with David Waldo and Nancy Entrican in particular taking a leadership role in that. Really, really grateful for that work. I think the stewardship of the building and the stewardship of the grounds is important. It allows the building to have the fullest possible ministry, and it allows the building to sort of proclaim to the neighborhood that something vibrant is going on here. My daughter does Girl Scouts at a kind of dilapidated looking Lutheran church. It's possible that there's a vibrant congregation within there, but it's sort of hard to believe it when you look at the state of the building from the outside. So I think it matters to do this work. I'm grateful to those folks. Liz is working on getting a pastoral care team re-energized. And I hope there'll be, I don't know, you may have ideas as well for things that might happen. I hope it'll be a neat time for the parish as well as for me.
So the bishop was very smart, and she said, so what is the congregation's goals while you are on sabbatical? He said, I don't know. So he came back and asked us, and we said, we said, new and old ways to serve. So we're going to have a ministry fair the week after Easter, which is pretty funny actually, because that's actually considered low Sunday. But no, you guys are all going to come and find out about all the different ministries. And specifically, somebody might be calling you and saying, hey, I understood you did Friday night dinners. And will you represent Friday night dinners and the acolytes and the ushers? And we have some new ideas too, especially emergency preparedness. So there are all sorts of ways for people to get involved in this parish, and we need you. And so it's just going to be a wonderful time of growth for both Martin and us.
I'm glad you spoke to Friday Feast. I went to get coffee between the services, and I bumped into a guy who said, when is the Friday Feast getting started again? I want to come to dinner. So very well worth having a conversation with Westminster and with our friends at Free Lunch Collective. They would be natural partners to help with that.
You know, it's interesting, after these 2 years when we've been separated, and now we're coming back together and we're learning how to, as the Lenten series says, how to reconnect with each other. And I remember Sally's son, we were over there talking, and he teaches at Roosevelt. I don't know, what is he? He teaches chemistry at Roosevelt. And in one of his classes, one of the students just got up and was walking out. He says, what are you doing? He says, well, I got a phone call. He said, that may have been the way you dealt with it when we were at home, but we don't answer your phone in class. We sit down. So that was just a perfect example to me of what it's like for all of us. We're all having to relearn how to do some of these things and get used to sitting close to someone again and communicating with each other one-on-one. So this ministry fair is going to be a wonderful opportunity, so I encourage you to come. And there are 2 other things that I want to remind you about. Martin had talked about the Building and Grounds community. Well, we have a work day here at Grace on Saturday, April 9th from 10 until 2. And it's going to be, you can spread bark dust, you can clean windows inside the building or outside the building. There's lots of windows. So if it's raining, you won't get wet if you're cleaning them inside. And the ones who come early will get to choose their jobs. And there's not as much as, we had a whole lot to do last year because, the grounds just hadn't been dealt with, and now they are being dealt with, so now it's just tidying up things. So I encourage you to come on that day.
And on tomorrow, some of us are going down into the boiler room to clean out the boiler room. People have invited me to come into the boiler room. I don't want to go into the boiler room until I have to. I will be wearing my mask. It's kind of a creepy, it sounds like a creepy thing, but it'll be during the daytime, it'll be light. I hope. Exactly. Yeah. Okay, and then Mother Jean's party, I'm going to remind you again, it's this Friday from 6 until 8, and we will have, there'll be tables in here spread around, the windows will be open, there'll be food along that wall and beverages over there, and there'll be a table out here, so if you don't want to be inside with people, you'll have plenty of options. And if, for those of you who are watching this on the screen, feel free to send in a video to Mother Jean. It would be great. If we can have those. Evelyn, when did you need those?
Middle of the week.
So the middle of the week. So if you can get those to us by Wednesday, that would be great. And if you want to send a card, that's fine too. We'll have a basket for those sorts of things. And we have a couple of gifts that we'll be giving to Mother Jean at 7 o'clock. And we're going to have a classical guitarist, Peter Ziza. He's a lovely classical guitarist here. And there'll be coffee, tea, water, juice, beer, wine. It'll be a lovely, lovely day, a lovely evening. I think that's everything that I have. Is there anything else that anybody has? Any other questions? If not, we will do another one of these at the last Sunday in April, last Sunday in May, June, and July, and then Martin will be back. Yes.
I'm just sitting here realizing that I haven't really plugged back in and tried to wrap my mind around this whole project. And so I was about to turn to Andrew and say, what's the best way for me to start that? And I'm thinking, while the fire is lit, so to speak, I want to go home and I want to get online and I want to go somewhere and I want to find something that will get me started. And I guess what I'm looking for is kind of almost the Reader's Digest version to start with, if there's such a thing. So if I were looking for that, where would I go?
Hang on. Here it goes.
Yeah.
Well, while she's getting that, there is a website too, that's very good, it's pretty comprehensive.
That's, yeah. It's like all this information has been floating around and my mind is sort of, observing it, but not knowing where to get it. And okay, great.
We have these in the hallway. And
Perfect.
they have the website, and that's the best.
Okay. Yeah, and the other thing that occurred to me is that you're sort of also in the building the bandwagon stage. Would that be a good way to put it? You're building the bandwagon. And the bandwagon's about to get in motion, and some people are already on board. And then some people are wondering what's in the bandwagon, and some are wondering whether they want to jump on. So exactly. So that's how it feels right now to me.
And the website, for those of you who are watching on the recorded version of this, is gracecommonspdx.org. So GRACECOMMONS pdx.org.
I like meetings that get us out in under an hour, so we'll make it our plan to wrap up. Just sort of as a closing, just my huge gratitude to this leadership team that is sitting up here and the leadership team more broadly at Grace. We've named the fundraising team. The vestry is simply extraordinary. Buildings and Grounds, Altar Guild, so many ministries at Grace. I've certainly been part of communities where governance was draining or painful, and it's not. at Grace. I look forward to vestry meetings. I look forward to the wisdom that I encounter there. So grateful for the many ministries at Grace. So grateful for your ministries. Thank you very much for everything that you do to make this this community extraordinary. I'm just no place I'd rather be than here. Oh, and thank you, Evelyn, for everything. I mean, I mentioned Matthew David earlier, and the innovation that's having a digital minister. None of it's possible if Evelyn Prater doesn't step up 2 years ago and take us kicking and screaming onto the internet, where we've become, we really have an extraordinary ministry now. Something very moving about being in the chat and encountering people who are in Alaska, who are in Europe, who are, I think we had a guy from Kenya worshiping with us at one. It's really an extraordinary ministry. Thank you for that, Evelyn. I saw Liz a second ago.
She had to leave.
Well, she had to leave. Yeah. I was going to ask her to dismiss us, but now we can never leave. I guess in her absence, I'm allowed to dismiss us. I thank you for being here. Thanks for all you do. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.
Thank you.